Hazrat Ali alayhi salam has said that all that is in the Quran is in the Surah Al-Fatiha, and all that is in the Surah Al-Fatiha is in the Bismillah, and all that is in the Bismillah is in the Ba of the Bismillah, and all that is in the Ba of the Bismillah is in the point which is under the Ba, and I am the point which is under the point.
मनस्तो मनम गुलाम अली मौला मन कुंतो मौला मौला मन कुंतो مولا فهذا علي مولا فهذا علي مولا तारा दिल तारे दिल तारे दारे तारा दिल तारे दिल तारे दारे हम तुम तना ना 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 तना ना ना रे हम तुम तना ना 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 तना ना ना रे तना ना 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 तना ना ना रे ya la li 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 ya la ya li مولا ali مولا مولا ali مولا खुसरो ने चामुद दीन के दर पे खुसरो ने जाम दीन के दर पे गाना कौल कलबाना रे गाना कौल कलबाना रे गाना कौल कलबाना रे मन कुन तो मौला मौला मन कुन तो मौला मौला फहज़ा अलीयुन मौला रे फहज़ा अलीयुन मौला तारा दिल तारे दिल तारे तारे तारा दिल तारे दिल तारे तारे मन कुन तो मौला मौला मन कुन तो मौला 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 हम हैं गुलाम अली लेके नाम अली हम हैं गुलाम अली लेके नाम अली मुश्किल अपनी आसान कर लेते हैं अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं अली अली मौला अली मौला अली 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 कौन है मेरे मौला का सानी कोई दाता नहीं ऐसा दानी अली अली मौला अली कौन है मेरे मौला का सानी कोई दाता नहीं ऐसा दानी हम मुरीदों खुशी से भर लेते हैं, अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं। अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली। सच तो ये है कि मुश्किल कुशा है, यानी हर गम के मौला गवाह है। अली अली मौला अली, सच तो ये है कि मुश्किल कुशा है, यानी हर गम के मौला गवाह है। उनके सदके में गम से उभर लेते हैं, अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं, अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं। अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, अली अली मौला अली मौला अली। हम है गुलाम अली लेके नाम अली, हम है गुलाम अली लेके नाम अली, मुश्किल अपनी आसान कर लेते हैं, अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं, अपना दामन खुशी से भर लेते हैं। अली अली मौला अली मौला अली, 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 अली अली मौला अली मौला अली।
From the very beginnings of Islam, the search for knowledge has been central to our cultures. I think of the words of Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib, the first hereditary Imam of the Shia Muslims, and the last of the four rightly guided caliphs after the passing away of the Prophet, may peace be upon him. In his teachings, Hazrat Ali emphasized that no honor is like knowledge. And then he added, no belief is like modesty and patience, no attainment is like humility, no power is like forbearance, and no support is more reliable than consultation. Notice that the virtues endorsed by Hazrat Ali are qualities which subordinate the self and emphasize others: modesty, patience, humility, forbearance, and consultation. What he thus is telling us is that we find knowledge best by admitting first what it is we do not know, and by opening our minds to what others can teach us.
یا علی مدد، خوش آمدید، بیانوینو. از شما متشکرم که در بازتاب جمعه شب دیگری با ما هستید. نام من رینا جیسا است و افتخار من این است که از همه اعضای جماعت، اعضای خانواده های چند عقیده‌ای و همه کسانی که از سراسر کشور و سراسر جهان در حال تماشای این برنامه هستند استقبال میکنم. من از شهر خود ونکوور بریتیش کلمبیا با شما می پیوندم و خوشحالم که امشب میزبان شما هستم. اکنون با پایان ماه فبروری می رسیم. این بدان معنی است که بهار در شرف شروع است. اگرچه در اینجا در ونکوور ما فقط یک بارش برف قابل توجه داشتیم، اما از قبل احساس می کنم که بهار نزدیک است. من واقعا منتظر دیدن شکوفه شدن گلها، افزایش دما و واقعا منتظر جشنواره سالانه شکوفه های گیلاس هستم که در اینجا در ونکوور برگزار می شود. همچنین امیدوارم از قسمت داستان‌های قهرمانان هفته گذشته ما لذت برده باشید. صحبت‌های دکتر ویرانی من را با داستان‌های از ایمانمان آشنا کرد که من قبلا نشنیده بودم. من همچنین از شنیدن داستان‌های شما در مورد گنان‌ها و قصاید مورد علاقه‌تان بسیار لذت بردم. این هفته همچنین یک نقطه عطف هیجان انگیز بوده است، زیرا چندین ولایت برنامه واکسیناسیون کووید را برای سالمندان ساکن جامعه آغاز میکنند. من میدانم که تعدادی از اعضای جماعت که در خانه زندگی میکنند توانستند اولین دوزهای خود را از این هفته دریافت کنند و بسیاری دیگر از اعضای جماعت قرار است دوزهایشان را در طی چند هفته آینده دریافت کنند. به همه شما و خانواده هایتان تبریک میگویم. امیدوارم که همه اعضای سالمند جماعت در سراسر کشور که در خانه زندگی میکنند فرصتی برای دریافت اولین دوز خود را داشته باشند. این یک نقطه عطف قابل توجه و شگفت‌انگیز است که هر روز نور آن در انتهای تونل روشن‌تر می شود. در طول چند هفته گذشته من در مورد بسیاری از نعمت‌ها و چالش‌هایی که در طی این هفته همگیری بر سر راه ما قرار گرفته است تأمل کردم. به عنوان یک معلم استپ، یکی از این نعمات برای من توانایی ادامه آموزش آنلاین بیت العلم و ادامه ارتباط با دانش آموزانم بوده است. البته این با چالش‌های خاص خود همراه بوده است و من می‌دانم که معلمان در سراسر کشور از دوران ابتدایی تا دوره متوسطه بسیار سخت تلاش کردند تا برنامه‌های درسی را برای دانش آموزان ما زنده نگه دارند. ما در حال یافتن راه‌های خلاقانه و ابتکاری بودیم تا اطمینان حاصل شود که آموزش برای شاگردان لذت بخش و معنادار باشد. ما بسیار خوش شانس هستیم که برنامه درسی متوسطه IIS پر از داستان‌های بسیار غنی و زیبا است. در این هفته وقایع نگاری درباره زندگی حضرت علی، اولین امام ما، از اهمیت ویژه‌ای برخوردار است. این هفته یوم علی، سال روز تولد حضرت علی علیه السلام را گرامی می‌داریم. در برنامه درسی داستانی وجود دارد که تمایز امام علی علیه السلام را با تولد وی در کعبه، جایی که مادرش برای دعا می‌رفت، نشان می‌دهد. حتی فراتر از تفسیر شیعه از اسلام، حضرت علی به عنوان یکی از مهمترین شخصیت‌های فکری و معنوی پس از پیامبر اکرم شناخته شده است. حضرت علی علیه السلام به عنوان یکی از 4 خلیفه و یکی از خلفای راشدین مورد احترام است. به عنوان خلیفه، به عنوان امام، حضرت علی الگویی را برای رهبری مسلمانان با محوریت ارزش‌ها، اخلاق و اصول اسلام بنا نهاد. در بخش امشب فرصت خواهیم داشت تا به زندگی میراث حضرت علی علیه السلام بپردازیم. بنابراین بیایید در مورد برنامه امشب صحبت کنیم. ما امشب دکتر حسین رشید را با خود داریم که در کارهای علمی و تأمل معاصر درباره زندگی امام علی علیه السلام به عنوان یک قهرمان وجود دارد. دکتر رشید ما را در زندگی حضرت علی و اعضای اهل البیت و ارزش‌های اخلاقی که می‌توانیم از نمونه آنها بیاموزیم راهنمایی می‌کند. سپس ما یک سخنرانی کوتاه در مورد نکات برجسته کار رضا شاه کاظمی درباره امام علی علیه السلام، عدالت، یاد بود و معرفی معنویت امام علی علیه السلام خواهیم داشت. سپس ما برنامه خود را مانند همیشه با اجرای زیبای موسیقی به پایان خواهیم رسانید. و حالا من به گرمی از دکتر حسین رشید در این نمایش استقبال میکنم. دکتر رشید مرد رنسانس امروزی است. او دارای لیسانس در مطالعات خاورمیانه از دانشگاه کلمبیا، یک فوق لیسانس در مطالعات الهیات متمرکز بر اسلام و یک مدرک کارشناسی ارشد و دکترا در زبانها و فرهنگ‌های خاور نزدیک با تمرکز بر جنوب و آسیای میانه از دانشگاه هاروارد است. تحقیقات وی بر روی مسلمانان و فرهنگ عامه آمریکا متمرکز است. پروژه های فعلی وی شامل یک فیلم مستقل در مورد دستگیری های نادرست تروریسم، یک مستند درباره مسلمانان در آمریکا و یک برنامه تلویزیونی برای کودکان و یک پروژه موزیم در مورد دین و جاز است. او با موزیم کودکان منهتن به عنوان کارشناس محتوا در نمایشگاه آمریکا تا زنجبار فرهنگ های مسلمانان نزدیک و دور کار کرد. لطفاً از دکتر رشید استقبال کنید.
Ya Ali Madet, Dr. Rashid, and thank you for joining us on tonight's program. Tonight we commemorate Yom Ali, the birthday of Imam Ali. Can you start by sharing with us the importance of commemorating events generally?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and Ya Ali Madet. Rina, thanks so much for having me and really asking such a provocative question right off the bat. When we think about why we celebrate our holidays, right? The word holidays comes from holy days. These are times where we try to remember what it is for us as spiritual beings and bodies to cultivate our spirit. And so when we have these commemoration days, when we have these holy days, you know, I think there are three ways we can start thinking about it. One is we're trying to remember our history. We're trying to commemorate our history. And who is Imam Ali alayhi salam is of course the first Imam and representative of the chain of Imamate. But we think about Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, and Bibi Zainab alayhi salam, Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, and we think about all these figures. So the commemoration, first and foremost, is a way to place ourselves in history and tell us who we are. The second reason I would suggest that we do these commemorations is to say this is how we got here. It's not just about the history, but it's also saying this is where we're at now because of where we came from. So it's not just about the history, but it's about understanding our present and what we owe the people who got us to the point we're at and what we owe the people who come after us. And thirdly, is that this is an opportunity for us to look at a role model like Imam Ali and say, there is something about Imam Ali that is so important that we must commemorate him. And we ask ourselves, why is that? So that these commemorations, these holidays, become a chance for us to catalyze, for us to think about who we are, why we act the way we are, and to recommit ourselves to bettering ourselves, both materially and spiritually, for the sake of ourselves, our community, for the world at large. So I think these are some of the reasons why it's important that we start celebrating these holidays. And this is true for Yom Ali or any other religious observation that we make.
Thank you for that beautiful reflection on the importance of commemoration. The use of holidays and festivals to reflect on who we are and where we came from really resonated with me, which leads me to my next question of why Yom Ali specifically. We know Imam Ali is important to us as our first Imam, but how is he revered by the broader Ummah? Are there specific examples or stories you can share with us?
You know, Rina, when you talk about why we celebrate Yom Ali, we of course as Shia Ismailis recognize Imam Ali's role as the Imam, as the first Imam, who is divinely ordained to take over leadership of the community in political, religious, and spiritual matters. What I think we also have to remember is that Yom Ali is a commemoration of Imam Ali where the figure of Ali ibn Abi Talib is not just an Imam for Shia, but he's also the fourth Caliph. He is, very many Sufi orders consider him the first Sufi, for many of the reasons that we as Shia consider him the first Imam. But they have a very different theology around that. And so there's a great deal of love for the Ahlul Bayt and Imam Ali specifically throughout the Muslim world. And so I think that when we talk about stories that tell us oh, this is who Imam Ali is, we have to understand that he takes on different roles for different Muslim communities, not just Shia communities. And even amongst the Shia, Ismailis and Isnasharis and Bohras have different conceptions of how Imam Ali functions. But I think the thing that we can recognize on Yom Ali is that Imam Ali is a universal hero for Muslims. Now, the question you're asking about stories of Imam Ali, what makes him a hero, what makes him somebody that we want to emulate, somebody that we want to commemorate, somebody that Muslim communities around the world, regardless of whether they're Shia or not, turn to Imam Ali. I think this is such a wonderful and rich space for us to talk about, because there are so many stories of Imam Ali that talk about his embodied ethics, right? He just doesn't teach ethics, but he lives the ethics. There's not a point where he lives differently from the ethics that he's teaching. And so we can obviously talk about him as Imam, the divinely appointed guide for the community. But there are stories that come before he is named the Imam by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family. So for example, we know that Imam Ali was born in the Kaaba, the metaphorical center of the world, physical world for Muslims, where for those who, when they practice the namaz, are oriented towards Mecca. So that what we have here is a way of saying that from his birth, Imam Ali is sanctified, he's special, he is in an elevated position. But throughout his life, we keep hearing these stories of his compassion, of his commitment to truth, of his commitment to justice. So we know that at various battles, the Prophet calls on Imam Ali to come. The Battle of Khaybar is, there are these qawalis that tell this story of the doors of Khaybar are shaking when they hear the name of Imam Ali. The angel Jibreel comes and gives the Nadi Ali to Prophet Muhammad to summon Imam Ali, because he is this heroic, valorous figure. But what we understand is this idea of fatua, of heroism, of jawan mardi, of chivalry, is not just limited to battle, right? It's not just limited to him being a physical warrior. There's this beautiful story told in the poetry of Rumi, where Imam Ali is battling an enemy, and they're sword fighting, and Imam Ali disarms his enemy, and his enemy spits on Imam Ali. And Imam Ali puts his sword away, he puts Zulfiqar away. And his enemy, who is ready to die, says, "Why are you putting your sword away? You had me." He said, "Before, when we fought, I was fighting for a just cause that was beyond me. When you spat on me, I became angry, and so if I continued to fight you, I was fighting for my anger, which is not a just cause." And so what we understand is that there is a sense of commitment to higher ideals that you always have to live up to, that you must always control your nafs, your ego, your desires, in order to be of the best service to God, right? And I think sometimes we forget about this motto on our volunteer badges of work, no words, which is very much an expression of that ideal. Work for the sake of God, not for the sake of recognition, not for the sake of your own ego. And so, there's so many stories like this that permeate the tradition that it's a joy to behold and a joy to partake in.
The story of Imam Ali refusing to act in anger and only wanting to act in accordance with the ethics of his faith really struck me. It reminds me of the same commitment to ethical action we see in Maulana Hazrat Imam today, and we see that through the work of the AKDN, which is described in the AKDN ethical framework as a contemporary endeavor of the Ismaili Imamat to realize the social conscience of Islam through institutional action. When we reflect on these stories, I wonder how those around Imam Ali were impacted and influenced by him. We hear a lot of stories about Imam Ali, but I would love to learn a little bit more about the Ahlul Bayt. For me personally, I would love to hear some stories about the women from the family of Imam Ali.
Rina, you bring up a very important point for us right now, which is thinking about Imam Ali in relationship. I think sometimes we as people who are struggling with how to live these ethics tend to fall into a trap of just particularizing one aspect or looking at one figure. And that's not how the blessed people of the house lived. They lived in relationship to each other. It is the Ahlul Bayt, the people of the house. They were a family. They were in relationship to one another, right? We understand Imam Ali not just as an imam, not just as a caliph, not just as this historical figure, but as a man who's a loving father, right? The beautiful stories of his relationship to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, to Pir Hassan alayhi salam, and the ways in which he takes care of his children. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family says, Ali is to me as Aaron was to Moses, except that there is no prophet after me. Right? That's a very powerful statement. This is a familial bond. This is a brotherly bond that's established here. And this is true as well for Imam Ali as a husband, right? When we talk about the ethics that Imam Ali embodies, it is thinking about his relationship to Bibi Fatima. When we think, for example, about Bibi Fatima's tasbih, that is the tasbih that was given to her by the Prophet to think about Imam Ali when he's in battle, to pray for Imam Ali's success in one version of the origin story. There are other stories where we understand that Imam Ali refused to recognize Abu Bakr as Caliph until Bibi Fatima had passed, because Bibi Fatima said, do not recognize him during my lifetime. And so we understand that he has a loyalty, an affiliation, a commitment to his family. And we see how that's transmitted. So with Bibi Fatima, alayhi salam, we see her commitment to justice when Abu Bakr and Umar come to her and try to take her inheritance from the Prophet, the land of Fadak, where she speaks and says, this is a gift from the Prophet, you have no right to it. And she stands in front of somebody who now claims leadership of the Muslim community, and she stands not only for her right as the Prophet's daughter, but for her right as the wife of the Imam. And we see that tradition continuing when Bibi Zainab alayhi salam survives the massacre at Karbala and is brought in front of Yazid, the murderer of the Prophet's family, who takes glee in kicking the head of Imam Hussein. She stands there and curses him to say that he has not succeeded, that he will be damned for eternity. And this is what Bibi Zainab does, is that worldly power has no control over her, because it is the power of the divine that has to be obeyed. And so that to obey the power of the divine is to always speak for justice, is to always speak for truth. And we see this because this is a family relationship, that whether it is Imam Ali, whether it is Bibi Fatima, Bibi Zainab, Imam Hussein, Imam Zain al-Abidin, and so on through the generations, that there is always a commitment to servicing others out of compassion, that there is always a commitment to standing for truth and uttering truth, because that is how you get justice and that is how you transform society for the better. And these are some of the things that we as murids are looking at and saying, how do we live this in our own lives?
It is really inspiring to hear about these powerful women and their commitment to act in accordance with their faith. I always get chills when I hear the story of Bibi Zainab and imagine her standing there in Yazid's court. These stories of how members of the Ahlul Bayt lived in a manner so aligned with their faith and the example of Imam Ali makes me wonder how we today can live by the example and legacy of Imam Ali.
Rina, when I think about how do we approach the teachings of Imam Ali, right? I mean, I think stories are such a powerful way to do that. But we have to be conscious that when we tell these stories, we're not just telling one type of story, right? It's not just Imam Ali the warrior. It is not just Imam Ali the Imam who is guiding the community as a whole, but it is Imam Ali the father, it is Imam Ali the brother to the Prophet, it is Imam Ali the husband, it is Imam Ali the one who gives charity. When the Quran says your friend is Allah the messenger and the one who prays and gives charity, this is a reference to Imam Ali, who while he's in prayer, a beggar comes in and he signals to the beggar for the beggar to take a ring off his finger. And so he doesn't interrupt his prayer, but at all times, Imam Ali recognizes that charity, charitable giving, and I have problems with that word in English, as the Imam has said in Tutsing, that philanthropy, charity is not what we do. we think about restructuring society, right? And the Imam Ali embodies that. And so we have to think about that intimacy of giving, that intimacy of thinking about what is due to others around us at all times. That it's not just I'm praying for myself, but I'm praying for the world. I'm praying for the transformation. And I'm not just praying for it, but I'm acting on it. When we tell the stories of Imam Ali, we have to tell a variety of stories. We have to tell the different ways in which Imam Ali existed in his life, because he wasn't just one thing, and nor are we just one thing. We have to look at these stories to figure out how, as we struggle on the best way to live our lives, we have this guidance, we have these examples in order to adapt and transform into our own context and turn into something more meaningful. But in addition to these stories, we have wonderful resources available to us. Some of our listeners may be familiar with the book Justice and Remembrance by Reza Shah Kazemi, or The Spiritual Quest, also by Reza Shah Kazemi, both of which deal with the teachings of Imam Ali. But we can also go to the source. We have Nahjul Balagha, which is a collection of sayings, letters, sermons, teachings of Imam Ali, from which we can all learn from. And very specifically, I would turn to the letter of Imam Ali to the man he appoints the governor of Egypt, who is Malik al-Ashtar. Because in that letter, I think there is such wisdom, such profound wisdom that goes not only from the time it was written, but into the present day, where Imam Ali begins in saying, be forgiving because God is forgiving, and just as you seek to be met with forgiveness, you should be forgiving. You should exhibit, you should manifest that divine attribute in the world, right? So every time we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, we think about God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. How are we compassionate? How are we merciful in the world? And then Imam Ali continues going on. He says, make room for those who have no access to you, because they're the ones who are most in need of access to you. And he says, be careful of the rich, be careful of the elite, because they have everything. They're ungrateful. They're not going to help you when things get tough. And they're the ones who will always be unsatisfied. Whereas it is the mass of society, if you care for them, that society functions well, because everybody succeeds when the masses succeed, right? And I think there's such power in that statement. And over and over and over again, Imam Ali makes this connection between what is in the Quran, what is in the Hadith, what is in his embodied religion, and saying this too is how we should govern, this is how we should live our lives. And it feels so urgent and so necessary, not because we're lacking that, but because it's always relevant. And for me, this is such an important part of Imam Ali's legacy. His personal legacy is thinking about the guidance on living our ethics, not at particular times, not at particular moments, but saying, I believe, as a function of believing, I must act in certain ways. And this is what it means to act in that way. Again, not just for myself, but for my community and for the world at large. And so for me, every time I think about Imam Ali's teachings, every time I approach Imam Ali's teachings, I have to take a step back, because it forces you to breathe deeply, to think deeply, to engage with how you live in the world in a way that's not just, I'm being ethical at this moment because somebody is watching me, but that God is always watching me, so how am I always ethical? Not only because I'm being watched, but because it pleases God and it is the guidance of the Imams. So this to me is how I engage with thinking about Imam Ali.
That is such a good reminder to not only focus on a single aspect of Imam Ali, but to look at the totality of his life for guidance and meaning. I am reminded of the story from the Ta'aleem curriculum about Allah being everywhere, this notion of God consciousness, and how we should strive to act in a way to please Him.
Rina, you're so right. How do we embody Imam Ali's ethics? And I think that one of the important things for us is that this can't be a decision that we're constantly making and asking ourselves, right? What Yom Ali does is it gives us a moment to say, how am I going to engage with the teachings of the Imams, and very specifically the teachings of Imam Ali, in ways that it becomes instinctual and natural to me? And for me, I think that starts with the question that we should all be asking ourselves, which is, what does Imam Ali mean to me? And Rina, I want to turn that question to you and ask you, what does Imam Ali mean to you?
That is a great question, and one that I have been reflecting on a lot this past week, given that we have been commemorating Yom Ali. Of course, Hazrat Ali holds a really special place in our lives as our first Imam. But beyond that, I see the life and legacy of Imam Ali as an exemplar of how I want to live my life. The teachings, the stories, the lessons from his life show me how I can live faith in my daily world today as I interact with others around me. And on that note, I want to thank you, Dr. Rashid, for joining us tonight and for sharing such wonderful stories with us. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Ya Ali Madad.
خیلی ممنونم دکتر رشید که این افکار را با ما در میان گذاشتید. زندگی حضرت علی و خاندان پیامبر صلی الله علیه و سلم واقعا نمونه های برای زندگی است. و اکنون ما یک ارائه کوتاه از کتاب عدالت و یادآوری رضا شاه کاظمی داریم. آثار دکتر شاه کاظمی که در سال 2006 منتشر شد، اولین سلسله کتاب‌های به زبان غربی در مورد روشنفکری و معنویت امام علی است. این کتاب خلای قابل توجهی را در زمینه مطالعات اسلامی پر کرده است و بینش اساسی در مورد معنویت و اخلاق امام علی علیه السلام را فراهم می‌کند. لطفاً لذت ببرید.
When I was but a child, the Prophet took me under his wing. I would follow him as a baby camel follows the footsteps of its mother. Every day he would raise up for me a sign of his noble character, commanding me to follow it. He would go each year into seclusion at the mountain of Hira. I saw him and nobody else saw him. At that time, no household was brought together for the religion of Islam, except that comprising the Messenger of God, Khadijah, and myself as the third. I saw the light of the revelation and the message, and I smelt the fragrance of prophecy. Through those who seek to know God, knowledge penetrates the reality of insight. They rejoice in their intimacy with the spirit of certainty. They make easy what the extravagant find harsh. They befriend that by which the ignorant are estranged. With their bodies they keep company with the world, while their spirits are tied to the transcendent realm.
Thus the Aqil, the true intellectual, is described by the Imam as being constantly engaged in the struggle against his own soul, against the lower inclinations, the passionate whims and distracting caprice of the lower ego. Imam Ali says justice puts everything in its right place. The first imperative of justice is to set right the individual's relationship with God. In the Imam's letter to Malik al-Ashtar, this is summed up in the command, "Be just with God and be just with the people." The individual's relationship with God is therefore at the heart of Imam Ali's teachings on justice.
Habituate your heart to mercy for the subjects and to affection and kindness for them. Do not stand over them, since they are of two kinds, either your brethren in religion or your likes in creation. So extend to them your forgiveness and pardon them in the same way you would like Allah to extend his forgiveness and to pardon you.
Imam Ali in the mystical tradition of Islam focuses on the principle and the practice of dhikrullah, the remembrance, invocation of God, arguably the most important theme of Islamic spirituality. The Imam's sayings on this theme are presented as commentaries on the Quranic notion of dhikrullah.
Truly, God has made the remembrance, al-dhikr, a polish for the hearts, by which they hear after being deaf, and see after being blind, and yield after being resistant.
این نکته برجسته یک کتاب واقعا مهم بود. اگر به دنبال خواندن کتاب بعدی خود هستید، اکنون می توانید کتاب الکترونیکی Justice and Remembrance را از وبسایت IIS دانلود کنید. فقط به سایت iis.ac.uk/publications/ebooks مراجعه کنید. قبل از رفتن همه را تشویق می کنم که به مکالمات این یکشنبه مرکز اسماعیلی از طریق تلویزیون اسماعیلی گوش دهند. این سخنرانی تحت عنوان اسلام و عدالت اجتماعی یادبود یوم علی را با سخنرانی دکتر هادی عنایت از مؤسسه مطالعات تمدن‌های مسلمانان دانشگاه آقاخان برگزار خواهند کرد. پس از این سخنرانی مکالمه بین دکتر عنایت و دکتر نادیه ایبو جمال از مؤسسه مطالعات اسماعیلی انجام خواهد شد. ما در اینجا در بخش مکالمات کووید این هفته مکس میکنیم. امروز عصر ما یک کلیپ کوتاه داریم با مجوز از CBC در مورد مسئله‌ای که همچنان سوالات زیاده درباره آن دریافت میکنیم، یعنی ماسک ها. از آنجا که راهنمایی در مورد ماسک ها بر اساس درک ما از ویروس کرونا و به ویژه با گسترش نوع جدید ویروس تکامل یافته است، ضروری است که ما آخرین راهنمایی ها را دنبال کنیم و مطمئن شویم که به درستی از خود و عزیزانمان محافظت میکنیم.
So there are these new variants of the coronavirus that emerged in the UK, South Africa, and Brazil, and they've made their way here. So you may be wondering whether you need to do anything differently with your mask. What we know about these new variants is that they're stickier. They have an easier time attaching to our cells and getting in, so that more virus ends up in our nasal and throat areas. That means with coughing and talking, there's even more virus in our droplets, and that's what makes these variants 50 to 60% more contagious. There's no reason to think that existing masks won't be effective against these new variants, but with more virus floating around, there are some things that we can and should do to up our mask game. Early in the pandemic, you might have bought one of these one-ply cotton masks or even these two-ply masks. But if you are going to use a cloth mask, what you really need is 3 plies. 2 layers of a tightly woven material like high thread count cotton, forming a pouch where you add a filtering material like polypropylene. You can buy this, or you can cut it out of one of these reusable shopping bags. Or you can create your own filter with a coffee filter or even a vacuum bag. But that leaves a lot of room for error. And if you're not sure if you've got the right material and the right filter, then a surgical mask like this one is a better choice. But just as important as the material is the fit. You want a snug fit to prevent air from escaping around the mask instead of through it. For example, if you wear glasses, you might have had them fog up on you while wearing a mask, and that means that too much air was escaping through the top of the mask. That's why tie masks like this one are more effective than masks with ear loops. The fit is tighter, and as you can see, my glasses don't fog up. But if you are going to use one of these typical medical masks with ear loops, there are a few hacks that can increase the filtration efficiency from about 40% up to about 80%. The first one is knotting the ear loops and tucking in the extra pleat on the side. This simple trick will improve efficiency by about 20%. An easier option with a similar effect is to use one of these ear guards on the tightest hooks or a simple hair clip to pull those ear loops behind your head. You may also have seen people wearing 2 masks instead of 1. That does add an extra layer, and it can be helpful by making the inner mask tighter against the face, but as long as the material and the fit are adequate, a single mask is sufficient. So make sure you've got the right mask with the right fit, keep wearing your mask consistently, keep distancing whenever possible, and we'll all get through this together.
و اکنون مثل همیشه ما برنامه خود را با چند اجرای موسیقی به پایان خواهیم رسانید. یا علی یا علی یا علی قصیده برای حضرت علی است که در سبک صوفیانه جنوب آسیا از موسیقی قوالی ساخته شده است. از طریق این قطعه هنرمند به ستایش حضرت علی می پردازد و عشق فروتنانه، شکرانه و ارادات ما را به نور همیشه موجود علی انتقال می دهد. هفته عالی داشته باشید و از شما برای پیوستن با ما متشکرم. یا علی مدد.
या अली